Hi, I'm Michaela Weaver, and in my video and my blog today I'm going to be sharing with you some of my story. And the reason for that is because I asked the members of the Discover Sober Programme group what they would like me to cover in a blog and in a video, and they said, we really want to hear more about your story. And so you may have heard some of my story in the masterclasses that I run, and so I'm trying to make this a little bit different to tell you a little bit more. So what I'm going to go through with you in this video is I'm going to tell you about kind of where I came from in my drinking, from sort of somewhat early days, and where I am today, and a little bit about my journey. I'm going to be as honest as I can. I'm not going to go into all the gory details because there were some pretty dark times that I don't think would particularly help in helping you or help me particularly. So, okay. So I lived with a very quiet, ignored level of denial for a very, very long time. And it's only now when I look back, isn't hindsight a wonderful thing? I look back, I can actually see those signs where I just completely ignored things that were coming my way in terms of messages. For example, the partner that put a magazine in front of me all about women and Chardonnay, and how there's a whole kind of generation of Chardonnay drinkers, and for them it was a problem. And I remember him saying, look, there's other people who drink too much as well, and he just left it on the side. And I don't think I even read it. I just closed it up and thought, well, that's not me. Drinking alcohol was something that I did. It was something that was never really questioned, apart from those little bits and bobs I'm telling you about. It was that's Michaela. Michaela drinks a lot, and sometimes she gets out of hand. I think that's probably how people would have talked about it, including my family members. It's like, well, watch out, don't let her have too much because she can be really unpredictable. But at no point was it any more than that. It was what I did. It was who I thought of myself as being. So I thought of myself as being somebody who drank, who probably drank quite a lot. I didn't really ever think of myself as having a drink problem. But the truth is I drank every night. After my mid-30s, I probably drank every single night, apart from when I had too much of a hangover to drink, in which case I would celebrate the fact that, hey, I haven't had a drink today, I can't have a problem. I know that's crazy now. Maybe this is resonating with you. Maybe that's where you are right now. For me to say it now, it horrifies me. So I drank every night. Where did it start? Well, I remember starting to drink properly at university. I did a science degree. It was very male dominated, and so I drank to keep up with the lads. I worked behind the Union Bar. I was fun loving, still am, bubbly, sociable, even though I was a bit socially shy inside. I think the alcohol helped to bring me out. And so I started drinking heavily at university, along with a lot of the people around me. And then when I went from university, I worked in London, worked in the city in a professional job. After works, drinking and dinners were the norm. And then at some point I got married, and we used to go out and drink. We used to drink in. We used to make cocktails on a Saturday night. And we used to get drunk. And sometimes when I got drunk and drunk that glass of wine or two too many, I was really unpleasant to people around me. I was. And at the time, I used to think that it was my inner truth coming out. I thought it was my inner demons, and somehow I had all this pent-up anger that just got released when I was drinking, and that was part of who I was, but I'd kept subdued. That was what I honestly believe. And again, this may be resonating with you because that might be where you are right now. And I now know that that's just not true. Alcohol changes our consciousness. It changes our moods. It changes our perception of reality and therefore changes our behavior. None of that internal stuff was who I was, because I've never done it since. I know in the last 4 years, I can count the number of times I've got angry on 2 fingers. I don't get angry. I don't shout at people. There's no inner anything. It was all alcohol. And boy, I wish I'd known that back then, but I didn't. And so it started at university and it just carried on. And so what started off as being something that I did for fun, alcohol was a response to more and more situations and more emotions over time. So I drank because I was excited about something. I got to share the news. Oh, quick, let's have a drink. I drank because I was frustrated about something, because I'd had a bad day, or I got stuck in a traffic jam, or somebody really annoyed me, or something at work hadn't worked out too well, you name it. I found myself on my own as a single mum. So I drank because I was bored. I drank because I was lonely. I drank because I was frightened. Any situation where my emotions were raised, and alcohol also raises them, so it's a double-edged sword, I found that I was drinking in the evenings. I never got to the point where I was a morning drinker, but I would have done. Because the honest truth is I started sneaking in a glass of wine before the school run, and I worked from home, and sometimes, maybe 3 times a week, I'd have a glass of wine with my lunch. And that would have just got more and more as time had gone by, because I didn't do it 10 years beforehand. But when I look back, I'd been subtly Googling to find out if I had a problem 10 years before I stopped and actually faced the reality. Because just as I didn't know that I was in a trap, I'll talk about that in a minute, nobody around me knew either. Because I wasn't that alcoholic, and there's no such thing, just because I wasn't that alcoholic on that park bench, just because I wasn't completely falling apart, everybody thought it was part of who I was. And that also meant I was sending out such bad signals to everybody around me, because I was successful. I've pretty much always worked for myself. So I ran a management consultancy company for a long time. I had my own company. I set up and ran charities. What else? I had a family, I had a home, I just did stuff. I looked after myself reasonably well, I thought at the time, apart from downing toxic poisons down my throat, every night of the week. I ran half marathons and raised money for charities around that. I did all this stuff. So nobody questioned the fact that I was drinking. In fact, they probably looked at me and thought, well, if you're doing it, it must be okay, including my children, which is pretty bad. So I had a huge life, and alcohol was just part of it. And it's only when I now look back at the thread that it wove all the way through my life. And when I actually stop, and you can do this, play back the movie of that thread, I just saw so many connections to bad times, poor decisions, horrible moments, every drama in my life had alcohol as a player. It was sitting there silently alongside me. I didn't even notice, but it was there. In that drama was alcohol. And everything about alcohol is the opposite. So if you see it as a benefit, it's not. It's an enemy. It's a liar. It's a con. And yet, the way our subconscious minds and our brains work, we believe it. And I fully believed it all. And so the fact that I am now at the opposite side of that says to me that it is absolutely possible for everybody and anybody to be as well. Because I was a bit of a wild child. I was an AC/DC rock and roll leather jacket, bit of a wild child. And so, in all of that group, drinking was it. Just like the after dinner, the after works parties and everything else. It's all part of that. In fact, it's part of the culture for all of us, let's face it. Between 10 and 20% of all adults, and the figures are probably higher, are addicted to alcohol. So if you're in a group of 10 people, 2 people will be addicted. It's probably more than that. It depends on your social group. So it was only when I had an ultimatum from my partner that I actually drew a line in the sand and thought, this must mean that this is a problem and I must do something about it. But what would have been really good, is if somebody had looked me in the eye 10 years earlier and said to me, number one, alcohol is a highly addictive drug. That is a fact. Get that in your head. Number two, I wrote all this down because I've forgotten it. I'm not going to re-record it. So I'm going to read. Number two, because there's so much to share. If you are drinking daily and or binging at the weekends, you are addicted. Plain and simple. Fact. Number three, being addicted to alcohol is a real and significant problem for you and the people you love. These are things I wish people had told me, because I would have snapped myself into a point of actually paying attention. And you must solve the problem. Number four, the guilt, remorse and anxiety that you feel in the mornings is because of the addiction and because of alcohol and not because of the person you are. It is what everybody who is addicted to alcohol feels. You are not alone. And number five, the inner demon and the honesty that you think comes out of yourself when you've been drinking is also nothing to do with you, your personality or anything else. Those are the things that I wish I'd been told 10 years before I finally kind of woke up, smelt the coffee and realised that there was a proper problem here, and it wasn't the fact that it might be normalised by 20% of society doesn't mean that that's right. And so I made the change. Now, what is that like? People say, what is that like? Okay, so I'm obviously offering people programs and coaching and support. And so people say, how do I know it's going to work? Well, you don't. That's the plain and simple thing. But follow the process that I outline and the blueprint and it will. But you must follow it all. Don't give up halfway through and say it's not working. It won't work if you don't do it. That's just fact. But the process I went through was way more complicated than the one I now offer other people. And the reason for that is because, one, I did it completely on my own. I didn't have any support from my partner because he'd just given me an ultimatum. And so there was no support. And anything, if I said I'm going to change, he'd just say, oh yeah, well you said that last time. So there was no support. I was on my own. I didn't tell a soul. And so for me, it was all the research I did and all the books I read. And I won't bore you with all of that, but it was intensive and it was complex. And so what is it like? What happened? I remember the moment specifically, and I will never forget it, when I just put the last cog in place and walked out of the prison that I didn't really know I was in. How can you be in a prison and not know you're in it? Good question. And so what happened was that I just finished reading another article, a scientific article, and there was just the last piece of information, and it all kind of like a safe, cluck, 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 cluck. And I was, that's what I did. And I went, oh my God. I was free. I had this enormous lightness. Just felt like the biggest weight had been lifted off my shoulder. Both of them. And I cried. I was actually in the bedroom reading the journal at the time. I went outside and it was sunshine. The sun was shining. And I just went into the garden and I looked up to the sky and I put my arms out wide and I just went round and round and round in circles. And it was just like, yippee. I still feel like that now when I think about it. Yippee! I am free. All of those times I was in the kitchen wanting to be free from whatever it was I felt was holding me down in my life, babies and children and all of that. When I was just putting on the music and downing the wine, thinking I was free in that moment, waking up hungover, nothing compared to that feeling. Nothing. And when I look back and people say, what is the most important, most significant thing you've ever done in your life? I have to say it was this. And I do actually add on to the end of the sentence, and of course having my children. But the truth is it was this. Because this has changed all my relationships. It's changed my children. An example of that is my eldest son is 8 years older than my second child, my daughter. And I remember my dad going and picking him up from a party when he was doing his A-levels. And he vomited in his car because he'd been drinking so much whiskey and stuff. He's now tempered that, by the way, gratitude point, because he's had my experience and learning. I wonder what he'd be like if I hadn't made the change. My daughter, 8 years younger, has gone through her informative years since she was 12 without me drinking at all. And so it's very different for her. She went out, got drunk once, said it was horrendous. That was coming up, and it was over a year ago now. She was too young, but that was what teenagers are like. She got hold of some, and that was that. And she just says she doesn't want to drink. Now that might change, but she's actually doing a project about alcohol. And so the difference just in that, and that's that, for some of you that might be a small thing. Yeah, it's just your kids. So my relationship with my partner and people around me, therefore, is strong. Stronger because of me and not because of them. Because I am strong. Because I've now set boundaries for myself that I realised I didn't have before. It was almost like internally I thought, well, you don't have boundaries about that, so why should you have boundaries about, that? And so I always went too far in terms of not the way people, I wasn't treated badly, but I just put up with stuff. And then it would come out when I was drunk. And I thought, oh, well, it just needed to. But the truth is I didn't have any boundaries. So how could I blame anybody else for the way that I was being treated? Now I have firm boundaries. And I'm consistent and fair in the way I relate to people, which means I'm reliable in my relationships, where I wasn't when I was drinking. I'm more assertive because I have some deep inner sense of confidence that I didn't have before. Now, everybody outside in looked at me and would have said I was confident. And in some areas I was, but there was something deep, deep down in me where, this is it, my inner critic was what chiped up at 4 a.m. in the morning when I woke up with hangovers. That has gone. I have no inner critic. And I remember saying that to some people and they go, what? You've got no inner critic? I have none. And I think it was all the alcohol stuff. But it must be because it's gone. So I'm confident in myself and I'm so calm. And when I'm out with people who drink, I watch them go through a point when they've had a couple of drinks where they just shift through that place where I am at, calmness, before they then become intoxicated. They just slide through it, or I'm there all the time. I'm just completely calm. And what else? It's like a pebble in the ripples. There's so much. Gratitude. I've discovered other things. I've discovered gratitude. I've discovered compassion. I've discovered mindfulness. I do yoga every day. I get up at 6 o'clock. I wasn't a morning person. I used to wake up and struggle and throw coffee down my neck to function. I still like a cup of coffee, but I have mornings. I'm a morning person. Yay, I love it. I'm coping with stuff. All stuff. I've had to cope with business pressures. I quit my job, in a company I was working with my partner a year ago to set up the Alcohol Coach. There's massive pressure. So that's business pressure, financial pressure, because I just walked away from a company. Don't do it. Well, or do it, why not? I'm coping with my best friend and my father are facing terminal illness. They're in it now. And that's hugely challenging because it affects everything. My social sphere has expanded through not drinking. Whereas people think it's a social thing. I don't spend so much time sitting on the sofa by myself drinking. I don't. Because I'm inner calm and inner everything else, I just think it sends out an air of positivity to other people. So that makes you more attractive to other people somehow. I've got new hobbies. Now, I'm not suggesting you go out and buy a 1,000cc motorbike and do your test and become an advanced rider, all of which I've done since stopping drinking. But what's your motorbike going to be? It could be gardening, it could be crocheting, it could be singing rock and roll and learning to play the guitar, it could be climbing mountains, whatever. Go and discover your motorbike because it's in there. And something else, I've got no limits. I've got no limits because I've gone through this and I've sort of conquered this. Well, what else? I can do anything. And so can you. So can you. Limitless. Limitless. So what is it like? I asked my students, one of them said, it's like getting out of a prison. I feel just free and I feel fantastic. That's because it is a prison. It's prison walls that come in on you millimetre by millimetre, year on year. And those walls are transparent. But we send out our energy and what bounces back with alcohol and addiction is negativity. It bounces back and it keeps us in. And once we're out, everything that bounces back is positivity. That is incredible. And that is freedom. So what is it like? I invite you to close your eyes for a moment or two. No peeking. I'm not doing anything, but close your eyes for a minute or two. And breathe in. And feel your shoulders relax down when you breathe out. And I want you to imagine welling up in you a feeling of absolute and total lightness, freedom and joy. And I want you to just let that bubble up through you and just erupt up in the air. I want you to imagine the bluest of skies, the whitest of clouds, the brightest of days. From where I was to where I am now, that is what it's like. I'm going to continue helping as many people as I can. And yes, that does mean joining a program, but I'm loving what I'm doing and I really would love for you to make this transformation with me. Bright skies, freedom and sunshine. Sounds pretty good to me. Thank you for listening.